Hello friends, and welcome first of all, before we get into this video, to the new office space. Here it is. You can see at least a section of it. This is probably the angle, or something like the angle, that videos are going to be in from now on, so hopefully the change isn't too jarring. This is roughly what you can expect to see going forward. So let's get into today's video. Now, my feudal guard army that I'm having so much fun and feeling so much inspiration towards right now is starting to grow at a pretty steady pace. So far I've printed about 20 troops, I've printed some abhumans, some tanks, but one of the things that wasn't available in the feudal guard sculpts was Astropaths. Now, as an Imperial Guard player, I really like running Astropaths. You can use them to protect units with a couple of their powers. Being able to dole out a couple of smites is never a bad idea. And having 2 Astropaths in the list was pretty much a must-have for me. So I had to figure a way to find some miniatures that would fit the theme of my Feudal Guard army, but would still read as Astropaths and still make sense in that role. So I encountered this wizard miniature, this Imperial Wizard is what I think the sculpt was called. It's a 3D printable that I found on Cults 3D. I will try to find a link back to it again and pop that in the description for you. And I thought that this guy would fill the role really well. So I printed one off, and then I mirrored it, and I printed another one off, and then I had 2 copies of it, facing opposite ways. And still no idea how I was going to paint them. Now, I didn't want to spend ages on them. Whilst Astropaths are characters, they're not a particularly standout miniature in the army. You know, they are just a 28mm figure. There's a lot of bodies to paint with an Imperial Guard army, so I needed some kind of inspiration that would get them done quickly. I could do something pretty easy and straightforward, just kind of speedish paint them, but would look cool and be fun and be interesting. It did not take me long to come by that inspiration. I am a huge fan of the Final Fantasy franchise. I've played most of them. I love most of them. And I just happened, in my daily scrolling activities on the internet, to encounter a picture of Thorn and Zorn a couple of days after I'd printed those Astropaths. Those, if you don't remember, are the 2 jesters from Final Fantasy IX, the blue one and the red one. Now, it immediately struck me that this was obviously a great idea. So I just wanted to put some quick paint down and turn my 2 Astropaths into Thorn and Zorn. I had all the inspiration I needed now, I just had to get on with the painting. So first things first, I'm going to start with the common areas, or one of the common areas at least, that is shared across both minis, and that is the underclothing. The original Jesters had all white underclothing. Obviously when we're painting miniatures they're much smaller than we usually view images at, and so I wanted to break that up a little bit. Went with a kind of white and cream sort of trade-off for all of the underclothing. So the shoes, the undershirt and the trousers, a cream colour for one and a white for the other. Once they're done with a bit of simple shading and highlighting, again, nothing fussy, we're just going for kind of a little bit above battle ready here. But once they're done, it's onto the overcoats anyway. So 1 blue, 1 red, and again, I'm sticking with very simple workups here, actually tried and tested workups that I've used a lot recently. This is both the same blue workup minus some of the highlights and the same red workup minus some of the highlights that I've been using for Night Lords lately. Next comes a little bit of a deviation from the reference art, and I think this is an important thing when you're painting from reference art, to know when to deviate and to be okay with it. Because whilst I love the white face paint on these guys in the original reference art, when they're wearing a big wide-brimmed wizard's hat that's shadowing most of their face, and the sculpts have got a moustache and beard as well, I just didn't feel like it made sense to put white face paint on them, so I just went with normal skin tones. On anything leathery or leather adjacent, I'm just using my normal leather workup, again seen a million times on this channel, because it's quick and because I know how to do it quickly. So that's Mornfang Brown, Agrax Earthshade, then mix in some orange for a highlight, mix in some cream for another highlight. It's very straightforward. And as usual, as I apply that, I'm going to be putting the highlights on in kind of a scratchy fashion to give the impression of worn leather. This doesn't take me any longer than highlighting any other way, so I tend to do it regardless of what sort of level I'm trying to paint at. Then it's parchments, papers, purity seals, that kind of thing. You know, just the usual cream colour. For the wax of the purity seals, I went for a turquoise just because I fancied something a bit different. I thought that would stand out well against both colour schemes without needing to do different coloured wax for each model. And I took this as an opportunity also to just scribble a quick bit of text on the parchments before moving on. Again, for me personally, this doesn't take me very long. For some people it will, so you might want to skip it when you're doing quicker workups. But for me, I don't find it slows me down overly, so I tend to add it regardless of what level I'm painting at. Right, next in proceedings, I wanted to start getting some metallics down because there's actually a surprisingly large amount of it. And as well as that gold metallic, I also need a bit of silver, so we can do that at the same time as well. Get all the metallics on at once. Now back to another variation. There's a few accents on each model, the haft of the weapon and a couple of little other bits. So we're going to do a Screamer pink based workup for Zorn. Whereas on Thorn, those exact same areas will be worked up based around Calidor Sky. And again, I'm adding shades and highlights here. If you are repeating this at home, use your own discretion. This isn't really a painting guide, more as just a sort of discussion of inspiration. And then once all this was done, I decided to just take a minute and take stock of how they were looking, tidy a few things up a little bit, because I hadn't spent long on them, so it didn't seem to hurt. And then I came back to them the next morning, and for some reason, despite the fact that I said all through this workup that the plan was for them to just be, you know, a little bit above tabletop, I decided that I needed to freehand the playing card suits onto their sleeves, like Thorn and Zorn have. And so here's a time lapse of me at 8 o'clock in the morning with not even nearly enough coffee in me, trying to do exactly that and having quite a rough time of it. Freehand is one of those things. Sometimes it's really easy and straightforward, sometimes it isn't. To be honest, in this case I was freehanding in Corax White, which is probably one of the worst paints to freehand with. The one thing about Corax White that you cannot save, no matter how hard you try, is its lack of flow. It just does not have good flow. So probably my fault just for selecting a bad paint. But of course, not being one to back down from a challenge, we got there in the end, and I got both Thorn and Zorn done with their respective freehands, so here's a little look. And then a quick bit of basing, and after probably about 3 hours, I would guess, of painting spread across 2 days. I was doing office work yesterday and literally just doing this in between tasks while I was like waiting for files to download or upload and stuff like that. Probably about 3 hours, and we've got ourselves 2 lovely Astropaths for my Feudal Imperial Guard, so that's another thing checked off. What a good time that was. It's not very often you get to take inspiration from your favourite things outside of your miniature painting hobby and apply them to very specific aspects of your miniature painting hobby. If I just wanted to paint Thorn and Zorn, I could just go and find 2 Jester miniatures and paint them as Thorn and Zorn. But being able to figure a way to make Thorn and Zorn be characters in my specifically Warhammer 40K Imperial Guard army, that's a bit of a rarer opportunity. And I think it's really important to be on the lookout for stuff like this, and that's kind of why I decided to make this video, because it's really good fun being able to pull those outside influences and use them to dictate certain directions within your armies and stuff like that, things that would otherwise feel quite restrictive. If you're ever running low on inspiration, just ask yourself, you know, what's my favourite video game, what's my favourite band? Pick something, and you'll probably be able to find a way to turn that into something of a miniature painting exercise. It's pretty easy to join those dots, it's just that kind of convincing yourself that it's okay to pick outside the box like that. So I had a ton of fun with this. Why don't you tell me in the comments what things from outside of Warhammer 40k you think would make really cool paint schemes for 40k miniatures? I think that sounds like a fun time. In the meantime, if you liked the video, don't forget to click the thumbs up button, and you can of course subscribe to the channel and enable notifications if you want to stay up to date on what I'm doing here on YouTube. If you check the links in the description, you'll find my affiliate links for things like Amazon, and you will also find a link to my Patreon, so if you want to support the channel, those are great ways to do that. In the meantime, folks, I'm going to get out of here now, but thank you so much for watching this one. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye for now, everybody.